The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome everyone to Marylhurst University's webinar featuring faculty discussion on equipping teachers for a diverse world. I'm happy to introduce the presenters for today's webinar. We are joined by Courtney Vanderstek, the Interim Education Department Chair, and faculty member Shauna Adams. Courtney and Shauna bring a wealth of experience to our education community here at Marylhurst. Between the two of them, they have over 60 years of working in education in various roles. My name is Amanda Stover, and I am an admissions counselor who works with the education programs here at Marylhurst. I'll be moderating today's webinar. Our webinar today will center around equipping teachers for a diverse world. So a couple of housekeeping items to keep in mind. We will have time for questions at the end. Please feel free to send in your questions in the comment box throughout the presentation, and we will get to them at the end of the webinar. We're also recording the webinar and we'll send you a copy upon the conclusion, so there is no need to take notes. Without further ado, I'd like to reintroduce Courtney and Shauna. So welcome.
Thank you.
So today we want to just kind of talk about one thing first about the education department and the conceptual framework. So the kind of bones behind the program. Preparing professional educators who demonstrate excellence in teaching, commitment to social justice, and courage in advocacy through collaboration with students, families, and communities. Would either of you like to chime in on that?
So this conceptual framework defines who we are as a program and who we want you to be as graduates of our program. We think it establishes a shared vision to help you teach effectively in all schools. And of course, you would see this woven throughout the courses in our program. Courses, your field experience, your clinical experience, all will be connected to the conceptual framework.
Great, thank you, Courtney. So, Shauna, let's talk a little bit about some definitions and how these definitions are implemented in our program.
Our conceptual framework really focuses in on social justice as a key component. And what we know is that the components of social justice are diversity, inclusion, and equity. Oftentimes people use those terms interchangeably, so it's really important to have some shared definitions. And the way we're thinking about diversity really is very simply is who's in the learning space. The way we think about inclusion is how does each person fit? How do they belong in the space? How do they find their place in the space? And equity, does everybody get what they need to be successful there? So together, those three pieces really help us chart a direction towards our social justice work.
So can you share a little bit more about, and a little bit more in depth about diversity?
You bet. We know that diversity basically means difference. And there are a range of human differences. All of us have multiple social identities that we step into any space with. Oftentimes, particularly if we're talking about social justice, it's easiest to think most about race. One of the things that's important to us is that we really be able to focus in on these multiple identities. How is gender impacting the teaching and learning space? How does religion impact the space? How do these identities interact and actually create the stories that folks hold when they step into us? And then how do we begin to understand what those stories are?
And then, so inclusion, how does that, can you kind of explain that?
You bet. So I think once we really have a sense of who's in the space, which identities they're feeling very powerful operating out of, and which of those identities have been devalued in some way, and where we want to help bolster folks. So once we know who's in the space, then we think, well, to what degree do they feel like they belong here? Where do they fit? So our focus really is in if, when, and where each person is able to be involved and empowered to take action in the learning space. Inclusion is really about connection. It's about relationships. It's about people feeling that they have a part in what's happening.
And then, so the last one we want to talk about here on this is equity.
Right. So once we understand who's in the space, what's operating, to the degree to which they fit and feel like they belong, then this question of equity is everybody getting what they need? There's often a huge conversation about the difference between equity and equality. And it's always important to be really clear that they are not the same. Equality actually focuses on what is the same, but equity actually focuses on fairness. Is everyone getting what they need? And how do we know that? And how do we provide that? Great.
So, Shauna, how does an educator address diversity in today's classroom?
I think in any classroom, the first thing that we want folks to consider is, who are you and what do you bring as an educator into the space? So I think the first piece is knowing yourself, understanding your own life experiences, the beliefs, the perceptions that you bring into the room, being able to acknowledge your own biases, being aware that you have some blind spots, even if you don't know what they are, that you have some, and being really curious about what they might be and where they are. Once people really have a sense of themselves, the other thing that we really emphasize is knowing your students. Where are they from? Where are they from? What do they need? How do they make sense of the world? And what are their stories about schooling and teachers? What are their strengths? What are their learning styles? So really focusing in on knowing who your students are.
And then, Courtney, can you elaborate on how Marylhurst implements strategies into the curriculum?
Well, one thing I would say that we do is we model what our expectations are of our students. So what Shauna just talked about as far as knowing yourself and knowing your students, we want to believe that we bring that into our classrooms. We certainly know have been working with the program for so long and knowing ourselves, but really getting to know our students. And what our graduates will tell you is that's an important piece for why they chose Marylhurst, is that we really work to build those relationships with the students. This is about knowing each of you, not just thinking of you as a classroom of folks. And then we looked at what are the expectations for our program, what does the state say we might have to meet, and how do we implement those strategies? For you as teacher candidates, that means understanding what are the standards for the program that you're going to be teaching in, and approaching all of your work with that lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we approach our work through the lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we want our candidates to do that too. So who am I teaching? How do you learn? What's your prior knowledge? What lesson am I trying to teach? How do I connect the lesson to what our students already know? And our goal and role here is to help you take the theories that you learn in our classes and apply it to the real world of a classroom. So I guess the bottom line is that we believe in focusing on people's strengths, and we want you as teachers to do the same thing, that each student that walks through your classroom door brings strengths into that community in your classroom. And if you can build on those strengths, you'll help each student be successful. And we want to model that for you.
Great, thank you.
You want to add anything, Shauna?
I do. I was thinking, one of the things we hear back from students is that it's been so important for them to understand some of the cross-cultural dynamics that exist in a room. What's happening around folks' identity? How does historical distrust show up? How does internalized oppression show up? What do we know about microaggressions and the way young people experience being excluded or diminished in some way? So I believe that our students, when they have a strong grasp of those dynamics, they feel much more confident facilitating the classroom and managing the diversity of the space.
Great, thank you. So, Courtney, why is it important for a teacher to understand a school's equity and diversity policies?
Well, partly it's a responsibility as a professional educator to understand the school policies and the district policies, state policies, federal law, which is part of what you'll learn through the program. But also there's a reason to have those policies. They guide and they provide direction for the school and the faculty so that you're all on the same page. It articulates shared vision and offers a way to have collective effort to say, what is the best way we can, through our curriculum, our lessons, and our dispositions that we practice, build the best program for the students in this building or in this classroom, so that each can be successful. So it's a shared commitment to school-wide goals, and policies pretty much tell us what we're aiming for, so that in fact, as we're implementing and integrating diversity, equity, inclusion practices in our classroom, we know what the target is, what the outcome should be, and what the expectations are.
Thank you. So, Shauna, can you elaborate on why is it important to have self-awareness and understand your own beliefs if you're going to be an educator?
Well, we believe in our program that understanding yourself and what you bring into the class is central to your work. There's a common saying that we teach who we are, and we really believe that. Who we are and our stories and our experiences impact the content we choose, how we choose to deliver it, what we emphasize, what we believe excellence looks like, what we believe rigor looks like, and what dispositions we value. All of what we're looking at in the learning environment, we're seeing through our own eyes. Anais Nin has a great quote that we don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are. And we believe that about classroom spaces as well. So important starting point is understanding yourself.
Thank you. Courtney, can you discuss opportunities to implement equity, diversity, and inclusion in the content area?
Of course, one of the things that we try to emphasize through our program is when we talk about equity or diversity or inclusion, these aren't separate buckets, that this is about having it woven throughout curriculum, whether it be our curriculum through the education program or your curriculum and what you're teaching. And there are so many opportunities, regardless of grade level, whether it be through the social studies, writing opportunities about just learning about others, learning about other cultures, learning about other ways of doing things, reading, literacy, stories that you read to kindergartners can show that diversity to kindergartners, stories that you ask of your students in a high school English language arts class can help them understand themselves and again, work towards making sure you have an inclusive classroom. So it's not as if it's a separate part of your curriculum. It should be woven through all of your curriculum, and the opportunities are endless. And our goal and our role is to help you build that toolbox to understand that you can do this effectively for your students.
Thank you. So this is a question for both of you. What is the value of teaching through the lens of equity, diversity, and inclusion?
Well, I believe the value is that it really allows us to focus on each and every student and the complexity that each one brings into the space. it actually calls us to pay attention to all of those differences. The value is also just recognizing students who have been historically underserved. And it gives us an opportunity to work with intention as we try to close the opportunity gap, the performance gap, the relational gaps. So it just lets us focus in on underserved students in a more powerful, intentional way. Also, the value is that it allows us to begin to see the power dynamics that actually create exclusion and inequity. And the more that we understand about those power dynamics, the more we're able to manage the space. So the value really is having the disposition and the skills and the tools to begin to give voice to all of these complex dynamics that exist in a room.
And I think the only thing I'd add to that is to emphasize Shauna's use of the word of each student. I think frequently we hear in today's conversations around education the phrase, well, all children can learn. And we strongly believe that that is true, but it's easy to get lost as an individual in that word all. And so we continually emphasize the importance of each student in our classrooms, and we want you to think about each student in your classroom. And using this lens of equity, diversity, and inclusion makes you helps you be more capable of seeing each student as an individual and their strengths.
Thank you. So this is the time for some questions. So if you have any questions, go ahead and post those. Let's start with this one here. Can you tell me how field experience and student teaching are presented in the M.A.T. program?
So our program has you out in a school by about the third week of your first term. So, and that would be in your field experience. It'd be half a day a week for the entire first year of the program. And the reason we do that is because in order to really understand schools and classrooms and students and that context of teaching, you need to see what real classrooms are like. And so that is an opportunity that exists that provides you with a way to observe students and also to have conversations with educators and a mentor from our program to say, okay, so what did you see? And do you recall when you were discussing this in your class last night, we talked about this concept. Did you see that in practice in today's observations? So it's continually building the scaffolding to support you to be a successful educator. Another difference in our program is that you have student teaching for an entire year. So you see what does it mean to be in a classroom from the first day of pre-service week for teachers to the very last day for students, and the entire range. So if you're looking at curriculum, you know what that building curriculum is for a year. If you're looking at planning, if you're looking at implementing new policies or curriculum adoptions, you'll have that understanding. We think it provides you with a stronger foundation to go out into the classroom. And what our employers tell us, the people who hire you say, is we want to hire from places that give student teachers that kind of rich opportunity. Thank you.
I think the only thing I would add is that the field experience and the student teaching experience both help to bring the content, the course content to life. That's what we hear from students. It makes theory and practice, it connects theory and practice in a powerful way.
Great. Okay, we have one more question here. What kinds of changes do you see coming down the pike in Oregon, and how will my education at Marylhurst address those in the programs?
Well, we certainly know that the demographics of pre-K through 12 students continues to change and become more diverse in Oregon. We've seen that trend for the last 10 to 15 years. We would like our teaching cohorts to also reflect that diversity, if at all possible. But regardless, understanding diversity, equity, and inclusion is going to prepare you to be more successful in the classrooms that we're going to have in the future. The other thing that I think is coming, and it hasn't been talked about as much or discussed in the media, is a teacher shortage. But I hear in meetings that I go to with school district administrators and from the state level that in the next 3 to 5 years, there is going to be a shortage of teachers in this state. So this would be the time to start preparing to meet that shortage.
Great. And this certainly doesn't just apply to Oregon, but the growing use of technology in education is something that we're really paying attention to and watching rapidly increase, and wanting to make sure students are prepared to use technology in the classroom as well.
Excellent. Well, I just want to say thank you to Courtney and Shauna for joining us today, and for those interested students out there listening as well. If you would like any more information on the MAT, MED, or endorsement programs here at Marylhurst, contact me. The information is up there on the slide, Amanda Stover. You can call or you can email me, and just let me know that you're interested, and we'll answer any questions you have and get you started in the process. So thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.